Welcome, everyone. Lori Stevens here from Laws Communications. I'm very pleased to be hosting retired NYPD Lieutenant Tom Joyce on this webinar today, covering the 6 steps you can take to be ready to step into a lucrative career after law enforcement. But first, I'd like to welcome all of you and to extend a special greeting to our international guests. We have a very international audience today with folks not just from the United States, but also Canada, the United Kingdom, Turks and Caicos, Panama, and Brazil. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to ask you all to feel free to write in with any questions you may have. Go ahead and type them into the Q&A section, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type them in as you think of them, and then we'll probably get to most of them at the end of the webinar. Also, this webinar is being recorded. All registrants will receive a link that will be good for several weeks after today. And beyond that, it will always be on the Laws Communications YouTube channel. And now about our speaker. Tom Joyce is currently the managing partner of Be Special Good LLC, a business consultancy that focuses on startup firms that sell technology to law enforcement. Tom was most recently at Motorola Solutions for a year and a half as a result of the acquisition of Vigilant Solutions, where he held the role of Vice President of Business Development for 8 years. Before joining Vigilant, Tom served as Director of Market Planning at LexisNexis for 6 years. As many of you know, LexisNexis is the global leader in public records and proprietary data solutions for law enforcement. His experience as a former police officer and subsequent promotions to supervisory roles afforded him the ability to transfer his knowledge from the public sector to the private sector as a subject matter expert. Tom retired as the commanding officer of the New York City Police Department's prestigious cold case homicide squad after completing a 21-year law enforcement career at the NYPD and the New York City Transit Police Departments. He has extensive experience in death investigations, all criminal investigations, missing persons cases, organized crime, gang, narcotics, undercover operations, and many other police operations. So he's well qualified on our topic today. And at this point, I'd like to ask Tom to share his screen and take over.
Great, Lori, thank you. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Lori. And thank you for attending today. I really appreciate everyone coming, and hope that this is a really good use of your time. It's extremely valuable for you in considering what life after the job and a guide to a career transition for police officers. As with any presentation, I think what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's a good use of your time, and that is the source credible, and is the information credible. It's kind of like the Intel two-prong effect when gathering intelligence, if it meets that certain burden. So Lori gave you a really nice overview of my law enforcement career, and then my business career after that. This morning on LinkedIn, I saw this post from High Point University that said, if you keep your eye on where you are now, you'll never move forward. The possibilities lie in the future, and smart people try to put themselves where they are going to be. I did neither of those things in my law enforcement career and in my business career. I am sitting here today with 2 careers that I'm proud of by sheer luck and hard work, but I did no planning. And so the purpose of today's webinar, and hopefully future engagements and conversations about this with the folks, not only on this call, but other folks who latch on to LawsCom's series of master classes and such, is the ability to give back, the ability to help the younger generation of folks who are in law enforcement careers right now, who are thinking, what am I going to do after I retire? Do I stay for 30, 35, 40 years? Or do I leave early, collect a pension, and do something else and reinvent myself? So there's a whole host of things you can do. But I will say that this is the same exact advice I give my own son, who's a police officer in the Washington, D.C. area. He's got about a year and a half on the job, and both in his law enforcement career and his career, whatever that may be afterwards, what's your plan? Are you going to take exams for supervisory roles? Do you want to become an investigator, an investigative track? Are you going to get in-service training? Are you going to get degrees? Are you going to pursue further education to advance your career? What rank do you want to retire at? And then all of those are fluid. You can certainly change and pivot when something else presents itself. So that being the case, I wanted to give back this knowledge and share this knowledge because I wish I had someone available to me both when I was starting my law enforcement career and then when I started my business career. And in the business career, I did have a mentor, a gentleman who worked for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who became like a father to me and who guided me through this journey as well. And like I said, I didn't have a plan for it. I learned on the fly, and he was there to mentor me, but I never even thought about it before the day I was hired. And I'll share with how I got hired in a little bit. So I generally do my presentations where I put up bullets and imagery and then talk the content. This will be the only slide where I'm going to read it verbatim because I want to make sure that everyone's here for the right reason. You are here today to stimulate ideas on what a post-law enforcement career may look like for you and what you need to do to prepare for and land a job and launch a second career. This is not the all you need to know webinar. The content is way too detailed and way too deep to do it in a 1-hour course or a 1-hour webinar. We could never cover that in this 1 hour. But that being said, depending on the feedback and the dialogue back and forth, we could certainly drill deeper into this in the future, and I'd love to do that. All right, so the agenda for today's hour, 6 topics we're going to go through. How you prepare before you retire and how you become Be Special Good. The name of the LLC is both a verb and a noun. What industries are out there, but we're really only going to focus on what positions are available within the public safety vendor sales organizations. There are other industries that law enforcement officers could consider post law enforcement. I'm not an expert in those areas. Heck, I'm not even an expert in public safety vendor sales organization. But I do have a lot of knowledge and experience going through that, so I want to share that. But those other industries too are both fulfilling and lucrative potentially, and that might stimulate some other ideas. But when we drill down a little deeper today, it's really only going to be focused on public safety vendor sales organizations. We'll talk about what full-time employment versus consultancies might look like, some of the compensation that you could think about and consider, what your value is, and then how to go about getting a job within this industry. Okay, the preparation. There's 6 tenets to being special good. And the way I look at being special good, there are a lot of people that are born with a super high IQ or physical attributes that make them just great at what they do. I think when Wilt Chamberlain and Lou Alcindor, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, were the 2 first 7-footers in the NBA, they were born with physical attributes that made them great almost immediately. The interesting thing is Lou Alcindor, his father was a transit police lieutenant, where my first job in the New York City Transit Police Department. So go Lieutenant Lou Alcindor and Power Memorial High School in Manhattan for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But you can be born with a super high IQ, and you can be and things come really easy for you when you're educating yourself, and you might have these physical attributes. Kevin Durant has a 7'2" wingspan for a 6'11" body, which is a little abnormal. Those physical attributes are just there, and it's a lot easier to be great. But guess what? You can still be special good. And I picked up special good. That's a slogan, a saying that Nick Saban said when he's trying to convert players and elevate their game performance, is to, they want to be good. They want to be special good, right? Maybe they can't be great, but they can be special good and be a super high performer. But to do that and be special good, if you're not born with those physical and intellectual attributes, you got to put in the work. You got to do the work. Malcolm Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours. Back and forth and debate that. But, he talked about just shooting hockey pucks all day long, every day, in his backyard in Ontario growing up. You'll hear a lot of sports analogies, so bear with me. Be passionate. Love the domain. All right. For those of you who know Simon Sinek, and he talks about the why, they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Okay. If you're passionate and you believe what you're talking about and you know it and you do the work and you exude it, people see that and they feel it and they know it, and then they trust you. So you got to be passionate. You got to be in a space that you love. You cannot fake it. If you tell people you love the domain that you're in, they're going to know you're a phony. They're going to know you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes and just try to take money out of their pocket. You don't believe what you're saying. All right. So find a place where you love it. You absolutely love it. Take pride in your work. Are you delivering a shoddy work product? I remember the first complaint report I did on a crime, and I didn't take the time to write it out neatly and a great story in the narrative. And my sergeant circled everything in red so that I had to rewrite the entire report. Take pride in the work that you submit, your work deliverable. If it has your name on it, do not submit shoddy work, right? Clean it up, go over it again, and submit and take pride in the work product that you deliver. Be creative. Break the mold. Don't say, oh, he fits in, she fits in the mold, she fits the mold, she fits the mold. You know what? Break the mold. Do things differently. Do them better. I have a better way. What about this? What about that? Be creative. Wayne Gretzky talks about his junior hockey team, a bunch of 10-year-olds, where they lost a championship game because the other team was more of a team. They had a program where they were the most efficient team. Wayne Gretzky's team lost that championship game. But guess what? 5 people on Wayne Gretzky's team made the NHL. None of the kids on the junior Canadian hockey team that won that 10-year-old championship made the NHL. And Wayne Gretzky attributes that because the coach allowed them to be creative on the ice and to do things that were a little more unorthodox and not just a system. Okay, so be creative and break the mold. Don't just fit into the mold. Sacrifice. What are you willing to give up? And I will say, I've given up a lot of things to do things in the police department. I gave up a lot of things to do in my business world, in my business career, but I never gave up beer, ever, nor will I ever. So that's off the table. But everything else, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? And then with that sacrifice, who's supporting you? Is it a wife? Is it a husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, your kids, your parents going to school? Your parents probably supported you massively in putting you in the right schools and making sure that you had the best chances of success. Along the way, yes, it's possible that you can be special good all on your own, but there's a high likelihood and there's a greater chance of success when you have a support mechanism apparatus in place that really helps you deliver and achieve the goals and be passionate about the things you want to be passionate about. Okay, so what industries? Like I said, today we're going to talk about public safety vendor sales, technology, if you will. But it could be uniforms, it could be firearms, it could be anything. Anyone who's selling goods and services and technologies to public safety and law enforcement specifically, we can talk and take a deep dive into that. But some other really good and interesting careers where a lot of law enforcement folks venture out into, and I have plenty of friends and old colleagues who have done this, you know, financial crimes, the banking industry, AML, which is anti-money laundering. I have former investigators that I work with in the New York City Police Department that are currently working for banking industries right now in the anti-money laundering space and doing investigations on suspicious activity reports and all sorts of things like that. Cybersecurity became a really big deal in the last 10, 15 years. The NYPD formed the cybersecurity investigative unit and computer crimes and all digital evidence that comes in and getting into the smartphones and all that kind of stuff. That domain is really in high demand right now. I know nothing about it though. But that's something that if you have those skill sets and if you're exposed to that, really good opportunities out there. And then there's the old private security and private investigation space, right? You have facilities and you have properties. Talking to a friend of mine yesterday, an old colleague from back in the police department, hadn't spoken to him in about 4 or 5 years. And I found out he's the head of security of a global financial institution, 7 or 8 cities in the US, 7 or 8 cities in South America. Really a great job, doing wonderfully. The executive protection. I have another colleague who's running all executive protection in corporations. I know plenty of former law enforcement officers that are driving specifically executives. So they're not handling an entire executive piece within an organization, but just they're assigned to one specific high value executive. And then there's the legal work in the private investigative space. Plenty of detectives work in for auto insurance companies, medical insurance companies, for fraud, private investigations, your standard divorce, motor vehicle accidents, all that kind of stuff. These are all really nice jobs and nice careers for the right people. A lot of opportunity. But what I do know is true for all of these is, are you accessing that ability within your career right now? Are you working in these places that give you the skill sets that can carry you out into these places? And as it relates to public safety vendor sales, the subject matter expert, the job that you're doing while you're there, you're establishing and you're building an experience, and you might not even know it. So are you starting to prepare for these things? And then again, like I told you, are you asking for in-service training, specialized courses, certificates or degree programs that you can go out and get? Will they send you to school, or can you self-fund these? All right, as it relates to law enforcement technology vendor companies, there are types of companies that I bring your attention to. This is a list according to Tommy. If an MBA were to see this, he would tear it to shreds because he'd say it's too simplistic. That's not, there's all these different kinds of companies. I'm sharing my experience and what I've seen and the type of companies that I've worked at and what you can expect. And there's 4 types as they relate to revenue and investments. And then there's size, large versus small. So the first one, a publicly traded company, has a stock symbol. They're on the exchange. You need to know that although they may be very mission focused and they're delivering great products and great services and they really care about their customers, at the end of the day, a publicly traded company has to answer to shareholders. And it's really important because people are investing their money, their hard-earned money, and they expect a return on that investment. So they have to make sure that they're meeting that. And there's a lot to that, and that's fine, but understand that that company is going to have a certain type of culture. Then there's venture capital companies that are backed by VCs or venture capitalists, and they're non-publicly traded at this time. They're owned and eventually going to go to either an exit for an acquisition of another company, or they're going to go IPO. That's the publicly traded version. Generally, what happens with a lot of VC-backed companies and investments, they get a seat on the board, and even though they're not an employee of that company, and they don't have a position, but because they're involved in the investments, there's a lot of influence, and it kind of drives what they're doing at the end of the day. And they're looking for those big returns and the revenue growth that they're looking for. So there's a certain culture that comes with that. The private investors and the non-publicly traded company, I've seen companies that were formed with friends and family money. They went out, they got some money from some people. Maybe it's a large investment, maybe it's a small investment. They sat back and they never touched the company again. And they said, call me in a couple of years when you're ready to sell, or call me in a couple of years when you go IPO, and let me know when I get my money back and what the what the investment return was. So there's those kinds of companies. And if you have a really strong CEO who can keep those investors at bay, and you guys can run, and that company can run with its mission and focused, there's a certain culture that breeds in that environment. And then there's your bootstrap principal, non-publicly traded company. That's when a couple of people come up with a really great idea and they put all their sweat equity into something without any big investments on the back end. As an example, a bootstrap company might be a person who knows the law enforcement market, knows law enforcement, might be a retired police officer, has a great idea, finds an engineer who can write some software, or a manufacturer who can build a device or a tool, and then take that to market really organically, with zero penetration in the market, and just working, knocking on doors, wearing out shoe leather, believing in the mission and going out there, not owing any money to anybody. Those principals share the equity. They leave some stock available for eventual investor. And they really started on a bootstrap. Those are really exciting, and they're a lot of fun, and they're most lucrative. So if any of you out there have a great idea, who knows, maybe someone on this call today is going to start a bootstrap company, and in 10 or 15 years from now, it's pervasive in the market, it has an urgent need, customers are willing to pay for it, and you're now this principal owning this business that's doing really, really well. All really exciting stuff. So every one of these is good to work for, but you need to know what you're getting into and what they actually mean, and how the behavior of the people who work there are going to be. And then I will tell you, large versus small, there's nothing wrong with working for any of the really large, well-established vendors, the big beasts out there, but know that there's a different culture there than there is in a small startup. A big, large, well-established company is very slow and bureaucratic. There's a lot of red tape you got to cut through. There's a lot of layers, and they do that for a reason, because they're protecting the company. They have shareholders. It's publicly traded, most likely, and they have to keep that in mind, and so they behave a certain way. Whereas a small startup, especially bootstrap or private investors, you're talking about hair on fire every day, sense of urgency, very agile. It's exciting, it's fun, it's exhilarating, it's crazy. You wear a different hat every day. I remember when I was at Vigilant, I wore a different hat every day, and I was a vice president of nobody. They gave me a vice president's title, but I didn't have any direct reports. Nobody reported up to me. I was doing all the work. And as Vigilant grew and the team started building, then eventually I had direct reports and sub layers down and multiple layers down, and it was exciting to grow in that area. But at the beginning of a small little startup or a bootstrap, you might carry the title of vice president or director, but it means you're rolling up your sleeves and you're getting dirty and you're getting to work. And for me, that was the most fun I had in doing it. It was really exciting to build products organically from the ground up. Okay, so what kind of positions are out there in a public safety vendor sales company? And this is where I think I'm not quite sure that people really understand what's available and what's out there. Sales and marketing. So let's talk about sales and marketing. So I had a really interesting call with somebody who reached out to me not too long ago, and they said, hey, I got 30 years on the job up here in New England. I'm thinking of retiring. I don't know what to do. How do I get into this vendor space? And we found out that this person was actually moonlighting in a sales role for a manufacturing company where they lived, and he was helping out. And I go, well, you do realize you have sales experience. You know how to work a deal from lead generation through the buyer's journey all the way to a closed deal. And I said, and as a police officer, you really need to consider going into sales and marketing, or specifically sales in a public safety vendor company. And he's like, yeah, but I don't know anything about the technology, or I'm not really an expert. I've been on patrol my whole 30 years. And I said, well, do you know anything about the car, the vehicle, the squad, the RMP, whatever you want to call it? And he's like, well, yeah. And I said, you know about light bars, and you know about sirens, and you know about the radio, and you know about the mobile digital terminal? He goes, yeah, I mean, I live and breathe that thing every day. I said, well, go work for a company that sells mobile digital terminals or light bars. I said, because you have the sales experience, you have the subject matter expertise, you did it for 30 years. I think you know the end user really, really well. It was a great idea that he then went researching. To this day, I don't know where he ended up, but he never even knew he had value. Business development is where I really started, because when I worked at LexisNexis, I had a territory to sell a product that I knew really well, but the other non-law enforcement sales reps were always calling me up and asking me, can you help me talk to this customer? Because your level of credibility goes a long way and you can accelerate my sales cycle a lot faster. And because I was chasing my own sales quota number, it was taking me away from my own number. And what we were able to do is say, well, why don't you stop with your own territory and work and help support the entire sales organization as what they call either a sales overlay or a subject matter expert to help the salespeople further their conversations with the law enforcement group. Okay, so you, in a business development role, you're creating opportunities, you're creating partnerships and integrations. And as a subject matter expert, you're bringing that knowledge to the organization saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about partnering with this company? Let's talk about what that partnership looks like, or an integration with these two capabilities. And when you're evaluating technology, you either build that technology yourself, you either partner with the technology, or you buy that technology. And so all of those things are all on the table for someone to drive business and drive value for the organization. Product and project management. If anyone is working in a police department right now and you're the project manager, or you own a certain product that you're responsible for to make sure that deployment is being used by all of the other police officers, detectives, analysts within that organization, you're already building and establishing that, and it's a natural transition for you to go to work for that vendor. And let me just say, if you work and know one widget really, really well, and there's no opportunity for you with that widget company, if they have 5 or 6 competitors, you've become pretty darn valuable to those other competitors when you're an expert on the widget that you were working within your law enforcement agency. All right, so think about fleets, think about less than lethal devices, think about firearms, think about software. All of these things have project managers within police departments that are giving you on-the-job training for a natural transition into this law enforcement, into the law enforcement technology or law enforcement vendor sales company space. And then there's always client relations and training, right? There's a lot of opportunity for vendors to bring in people who are experts with a certain technology or a certain product expertise, because it's critically important that the usage of the technology that's deployed within that agency remains really high. You do not want to experience a lot of attrition. You sell a product, the last thing you do when you sell that product is you want it to sit on a shelf. Because what happens is if they don't renew or they don't buy more, that sale was useless. So they need customer engagement, customer relationships, and in-service training. And that training could be paid or free. It depends on the company's model. But it gives you the opportunity to pass that knowledge on and to make sure that your product is sticky within that law enforcement agency and all the customer base, so that they don't abandon and go somewhere else. Every time you're not talking to your customer, that means somebody else is. So it's really smart for a vendor to have really good client relations and engagements. All right. And this is all subject matter expertise. All of your expertise in a law enforcement career, all can be played up and transitioned into these organizations. And I will tell you this, just because you are a police officer, it does not mean that you automatically can do this. You got to think a little deeper with those levels of expertise in those areas. As an example, I had a high-level leader in a large police department come up to me and say, Tommy, you're out there. I'm thinking of retiring. I want to go get a job. And he gave me a number for his salary that I thought was astronomically high. And I said, I don't know, Joe. I said, that's pretty high. He goes, do you know how many people I lead? And I said, okay, that's fair. You're a great leader and you have leadership and culture skills for sure. But tell me what kind of company and what do you think you can actually do and bring value beyond leadership? That's valuable, but beyond leadership. Like, can you read content on all the assets within marketing and make edits and tell them you're messaging correctly or you're messaging incorrectly? Can you close this? Do you have any sales experience in this space? Do you know how to build these relationships? Do you understand how this technology works together? And so that, do you have ideas and creativity around how these products can grow and build and expand? Have you ever managed products or projects? You know, and then the training. Is there any product that you have that you can pick up right now and nobody knows it better than you? And he's like, no. He answered no to all of those questions. And guess what? He's still on the job, and 5 years later, he hasn't retired because he's best suited to stay within the organization. Okay, so what is it like full-time employment versus a consultancy? And I'm going to bring your attention to the bottom first. So before anyone detracts on consultancies, there's a known saying in the space that says the role of a consultant can be summed up as saying you're borrowing somebody's watch to tell you the time, and then they charge you for telling them what time it is. That may be true in some other consultancies, but as it relates to law enforcement, I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Because the reason why they're probably hiring you to consult with them is to help share the knowledge that you have, what to say to cops, how to say them to the cops, how to message to the cops, what's important to a police officer. One of my favorite stories is a sales representative who's trying to do the right thing and was really committed to the mission, told a room full of detectives, and just think about how much overtime you can save with using our product. And I said, well, you just lost that sale because don't ever take overtime away from a police officer. So you got to know your audience. You got to know what to say, whether it's an analyst, a detective, a police officer, a police executive, a civilian executive. All of those people have different needs and desires for their agency. So as a consultant, I don't think the detractor as a consultant in this space actually works. There are a lot of opportunities to be a consultant, but let's compare the two. As a full-time employment, your full compensation package, you're probably working 40 plus hours a week. And if you're home and you're remote, you're probably working a lot more. You're probably on a lot. I'll be honest with you. You might wind up working 50 and 60-hour weeks. Versus a consultant, you're very flexible. You work as you need based on the hourly rate that you're charging. As a full-time employment, as a full-time worker within a company, you're going to have many, many contacts. You're going to have tons of meetings across the organization. A lot of times your calendar is going to be full, and you're going to be constantly sharing knowledge and giving updates and bringing and moving the kicking the can down the alley of the organization, if you will. But if you're a consultant, you're probably only going to work with one point of contact, maybe a couple, because what they're doing is probably consulting with you, getting the information, distilling that information, taking your deliverables, and then bringing it out to the broader audience of a public safety vendor. So your contact within a large organization or even a small one with a small startup environment is probably going to be limited to 1 or 2 people. But if you're a full-time employee, you're going to meet tons of people, lots of people of all walks of life in all different functional areas within the organization, both of which are really advantageous to the right person and the right candidate. Full-time employment could be office-based or remote, but if you are a consultant, there's most likely that you can do it remote anywhere. Some companies are making people work out of the office, but with COVID and quite frankly, technology, I've worked remote my entire 14 years. It can be done. It can be done efficiently. Nothing replaces in-person meetings. I think there should be periodic meetings face-to-face. When you do go face-to-face, you do get a lot done in less time. But remote employments. So all of those of you who are considering retiring and you say, well, I have to stay here for family, I can't relocate. That's probably true. But if you're not tied down to family and there's no limitations, getting remote employment is a dream, because guess what? You can literally say, I can move anywhere I want. I just don't have to chase the job. I had a conversation with my wife recently. Said, if you could live anywhere, where would you live? Where would we live? I mean, we literally have the ability to just pick a spot on the map in the United States and go and live there. Full-time employment is going to bring a lot more travel if you're in that type of a role where you need to meet with customers and be customer facing, especially on companies that have larger dollar value and they're very strategic accounts that you need to address, and there's customer facing meetings. As a consultant, you'll absolutely have a lot of less travel. You might not even ever have to travel at all within the consultancy. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. Traveling is exciting for the first 6 months. You go to all these new cities you've never been to, and then it gets tired pretty fast. And there's nothing worse than traveling commercial, I'll tell you that. My favorite saying one of my favorite sayings by almost anybody is Kid Rock, who said, he would live in a mobile home just as long as he could travel and fly privately. So I thought that was really funny that he would sacrifice a mansion and live in a trailer versus as long as he could fly privately, that's all he cared about. I thought it was really funny. Full-time employment gets you reimbursed expenses. There are policies and procedures on how you can spend and where you can spend your money, whether it be hotels, dinners, there's daily allotments or per diem maximums. It's not like this unlimited expense account that you can just go out and go hog wild and abuse it. Of course not. But there's a certain level of trust and policy that you fall into, and you have a certain amount of expenses that you can absorb, and they give you either a corporate credit card or you could use your own credit card and get reimbursed. And they're non-tax deductible. Consultancies, on the other hand, when you form up an LLC and you start your consultancy, you can start deducting things, and that's a conversation you need to have with your accountant on what's deductible and what's not. Full-time employment comes with a host of packages and HR benefits, from life insurance. And the funny thing was, when Vigilant got acquired by Motorola, everyone talked about certain things at Motorola that was great. But the one thing that everybody talked about going to Motorola from Vigilant was, guess what? You're not going to believe it. I just signed up for pet insurance. So big companies with good HR packages have great fringe benefits. In the case of going from Vigilant to Motorola, it was because they got pet insurance. Go figure. You're going to have to self-fund yourself if you're inheriting it from a retirement. From your law enforcement agency in the city and the municipality you work with, they provide benefits, or you might have to self-fund your benefits yourself with a consultancy. And a full-time employment in a company is probably gonna have a single focus on their product line, which is great. It could be absolutely exciting and fun. But on the other side, a consultant can give you a host of different types of clients in different spaces, with different technologies. It's bad to consult with competitors. There's probably, no, I shouldn't say probably, there's definitely going to be non-disclosure agreements that you're going to have to sign with covenants that you will not disclose information. I highly recommend that you behave ethically and adhere to those covenants and those NDAs. It's not worth the hassle. And besides that, you can live a life of integrity. You screw up one time and do something really bad like that and give intellectual property away, it'll destroy your entire career, your entire reputation, and you'll be persona non grata. So in a consultancy, be ethical, choose your clients carefully. You'll have to make a decision that if you go into an agreement with one vendor and there's a lot of competitors in that space, you probably shouldn't work with any of those competitors for a period of time after that, and you absolutely should not be sharing proprietary information. But it could be exciting in that it gives you a whole host of different opportunities and different chances. All right, compensation. This is something that I found to be really interesting. Every single person, and I think I've placed probably 20 law enforcement, retired law enforcement people into jobs either working directly with and for me, or in other companies, or within other units within the company that I work at. And every single one of them said, how much money, how much can I make? I really don't know. I have no idea. And because law enforcement, civil service, you're told what your salary is based on labor relations and contracts. Okay, that's what it is. You're told. I never negotiated my salary in 21 years in the New York City Police Department. I showed up for work. They told me how much I'm going to get paid. I took a promotion exam. They told me how much I'm going to get paid. In this space, you have the ability to negotiate your value. Okay, and there's a lot of variables. So the first thing I would say is when you go into these interviews and you actually land a job, you need to talk to someone who you really truly trust. And I don't think that there's anybody out there that's trying to steal money from you and get you on the cheap. Most people that I've met will pay you your fair market value. But I did hear one time somebody said, you can pay them a little lower because they're probably collecting a pension, so the offset will balance out. And that's, you do not get paid based on what you're making in your retirement and plus what adding on to that your new salary will be. That is nobody else's business. It's your business, and you are to be paid for the value you bring to that organization. And you should get fair market value for what that is. And those compensation variables can go with an annual salary with potential bonuses based on KPIs. KPIs, known performance indicators. It could be called MBOs, management by objective, where they turn around and they say, okay, here's your annual salary. Let's say it's $100,000 a year. And if you hit these 4 objectives or these 4 KPOs, you will get 100% of your bonus, and 100% of your bonus could be 25% of your salary. So your on target earnings would be $125,000. So when you're negotiating a salary, it's salary plus bonus. A lot of times in these organizations, sometimes they'll say, no, it's straight base salary and that's all you get. Sometimes there's an annual salary with a potential bonus. There's a whole bunch of very complex ways of compensating and bonuses. And then in a sales role, you can have a base salary, excuse me, with a commission for your on-target earnings. So let's say you're in a sales role and you have a quota for sales. So let's say your base is 100,000, and they say you have an on-target earnings potential that if you hit your $2 million goal, so you sell $200 million worth of products, that your on-target earnings could be another 100,000. So you have the potential to make base salary of 100 plus another 100,000 based on your goal. And then there's percentage sliding scales. And sometimes they're really easy compensation packages, and some companies make them incredibly complex. All right? It should be easy, but different companies and different leaders have different ways of doing it. All right? And it's based on a revenue goal. And then you could also get bonuses based on performance of your unit, based on your sales team, based on your company. There's a whole bunch of different combinations. Equity and stock. If you're in a large publicly traded company, and unless you're a very high key level executive, there's probably not stock awards, but they have employee stock purchase plans, which are very lucrative. You can buy stock maybe twice a year at like a 15% discount from the trading price, which again, if your company does well and the stocks go up and you bought it at a 15% discount, those could be very lucrative over a long period of time. Imagine buying stock twice a year, every year for 10 years. And with a lot of growth by the company and all of those discounts, they could actually put a nice little nest egg in your financial wealth journey, in saving money for ultimately retirement. If you're a high level executive, there might be some stock awards issued in the form of options, in the form of RDUs, which restricted stock, RSUs is restricted stock units. But here's what I do know, and this is what I've seen. And again, I don't know everything and I don't have a complete picture on everything, but executive statuses within larger companies generally come from very high level police chiefs and police commanders. And because they're not going to get into the weeds on the day-to-day operations, those are generally given to vice president titles in large companies, to high-level executives within large police departments or federal agencies or state agencies. And really, they're a relationship builder. They're a business development executive, and it's really about their Rolodex and the meetings that they can really bring on. I think I'm mostly talking to, your sergeants, lieutenants, captains in the middle, and who have a really diverse skill set that are coming in and coming into these agencies to be workers and to really move the needle in delivering sales help and sales support, training, and building out these products. All right. Like I told you before, when I got to Vigil, I was the VP of nobody. I was a player coach. I was an independent contributor, but I grew with the startup company. Okay. And that was a lot of fun too. There was nothing more exciting to me when my CEO told me, all right, Tommy, we're ready. You can start adding a headcount. Add another headcount. I'd go to my boss and I'd say, hey, I need another headcount. And before you knew it, when I started as a team of one, by the time I left, we had 10 people. It was awesome. It was exciting. And the consultancies, if you're going down a consultancy and let's say your hourly rate is $10, okay? I'm sorry, $100 an hour or $150 an hour, say. And again, that value and that hourly rate that you can charge depends on what you're bringing to the table. I would never take a 2-hour or 3-hour gig. I don't need to make $200, right? It costs me $200 to get out of bed every day, all right? But what you should look at is say, here's my rate, and I can either do a flat rate project. I'm going to give you 40 hours to finish this deliverable for you, and that's going to cost $4,000, or I'll work a minimum of 10 hours a month at $100 an hour. So it's $1,000 a month. I give you 10 hours a month, and you could have 2 or 3 clients as long as they don't conflict with each other, and you fully disclose that you're working with 2 or 3 other companies and they don't have anything to do with each other. You could easily work 40 or 50 hours a month, making $5 or $6 grand as an example, and having a lot of flexibility. But as a consultancy, I wouldn't take many gigs, if you will, without a minimum amount of hours committed, whether it be weekly or monthly, and over a period of time. Is it a 3-month gig? Is it a 6-month gig? Is it open-ended and green? All of those capabilities, all of those possibilities. So I can wet your whistle. I will tell you that in some larger tech companies, your sales commissions, the salespeople will, deservedly so, probably be the highest earners within an organization without hitting the upper level executives. Salespeople can easily come in with salaries starting with a base of 75 to 100 and easily double and sometimes triple their salaries. They have a lot of work on their plate. They work really, really hard. They sell a lot. They support a lot. They're on the phone a lot. They earn their money, I will say, but they also have a goal and all the responsibility is on them. And they have to hit a number, and there's a lot of pressure to do that. And with all that pressure comes some very, very nice compensation. All right, how to land an interview and an opportunity. All right, you could cold call an organization. Hey, there's a company I like what they do. I call them up and I ask them, I try and reach out, find somebody on the web or through social media. So that's the second point, and try to connect and network with people that way. And this is in order, in my opinion, on the best ways to do this. And that's considering the different possibilities. And then I'll talk about the last thing that's probably pretty obvious to a lot of people. Social media, I will tell you, LinkedIn has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tool for me. Since I left full-time employment and went to the consultancy in March, LinkedIn has been phenomenal in connecting with other vendors and connecting with law enforcement folks who are still active. Websites, careers and jobs. I will tell you that I've never seen anybody post open jobs. Well, I shouldn't say anybody. There's very few jobs that say, I'm looking for a subject matter expert. There is one company that came to mind. It's a recent vendor who I think they're only hiring former law enforcement. So their position vacancies that they put out and their job postings that they put out are specifically looking for law enforcement with a certain domain expertise at a certain rank level. Then there are recruiters, and there's at least 2 recruiters that I know very well that cater directly to law enforcement and only deal with law enforcement vendors. They're a great resource and they work really hard for you. And then ultimately the networking, your traditional networking. I remember a guy who works the room better than anybody. We would walk into a room with 300 people, and I know that in his mind, it was his focus to shake hands with every single one of those people and trade business cards in a traditional way. And then at trade shows, I actually missed a part I'll go back to in a second. But with the trade shows, you walk the floor. That's how I got my very first job. I was not ready to leave the police department. I went to a trade show. I spoke to somebody at the LexisNexis booth. I gave an unsworn, unsolicited testimonial on how great their product was. The 2 people that heard me, who were considering buying that technology, turned their focus on me and not on the person doing the demonstration. And they listened to what I had to say about how I use that product. And the VP of sales came and offered me a job right there on the spot. I wasn't even prepared. And that's what I said at the beginning. I wasn't even prepared to do this. And I think about how much more focused and how much better I could have been if I had done years and years of preparing, getting ready for this day. So I am the luckiest person in the world as it relates to that kind of stuff. I didn't prepare for a police career, and I learned on the job. I didn't prepare for a post law enforcement career in the technology space. I learned on the job, and they've worked out really nicely for me. I'm very fulfilled in what I'm doing. But I could have been so much better, and I could have done so much more, and I could have been so much more creative and made more contributions had I prepared even more. And I just want to take you back to one slide. You can see this slide right here. That's the floor plan. The floor plan for IACP 2019. Every one of those little boxes represents a vendor who is showing up trying to sell their goods to a law enforcement agency. And this link right here is interactive. And you'll be getting the PowerPoint. It'll be available to you after this webinar. So that being said, this is something you could look into. There's other ways of digging in and finding out who the vendors are. And then the final way of getting a job is working with the vendor in your current role and asking them if there's an opportunity after you retire. That's happened a lot. And you just have to be careful on if it's a conflict of interest. In the New York City Police Department, I had a 1-year moratorium from working with the vendor that I went to go work with. But if you're in the purchasing or evaluation components within that law enforcement agency, you might have a lifetime moratorium. So just make sure legally you're able to go work for a vendor that you're currently working with so as not to have a conflict of interest. So with that, we're 57 minutes in, there's 3 minutes. I can stay later for questions. Here's the follow-up information on how you can visit my website, email me at info@bespecialgood.com, my LinkedIn personal and LLC page, and then follow on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Okay, so and then the question I was for Cominair. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but is there a list of companies that one can get in order to start? And certainly you started that, the answer to that with that IACP map. Do you have anything else to advise them of?
Yeah, simple Google searches for IACP vendor list. And then there's a whole bunch of opportunities for you to find those vendors. And then if you become a member, either an associate member or an active member of IACP and NSA, if you're in the sheriff's department, when you become a member of those associations, you can request and they will give you the vendor list. And I believe they publish a vendor list brochure of all the contact information for all those vendors.
Awesome. Thank you. We have 2 people saying thank you. 2 questions have also popped up. Dwayne wants to know, do resumes work in this field? And if so, what do you recommend? And if not, is it just networking?
Fantastic question. I love it. So I was thinking of hiring and considering hiring a police executive in the Southeast, and he held a very impressive title. And in talking to this candidate, I knew they did the work. They walked the walk. They talked the talk, right? When I said, and you have to get that person a series of interviews so everyone makes sure that they that they fit the culture and they fit the vibe of the company and they have the skills. One of the people said to me, all right, before I interview this person, make sure you send me their resume. And I said, didn't you hear who this person is and what their title is for what agency they work for? And they go, yeah. I go, what other resume do you need? All jokes aside, it's good to have one. It's good to have one tightened up and nice, no errors. Make sure it's professional. Don't describe what you do. Describe what you've done, your accomplishments. Yes, you have to kind of say, I'm responsible for this, responsible for this, but achievements and accomplishments are also critically important. When I read a resume and it's filled with job descriptions, that just tells me what the job they're in is supposed to be doing. That doesn't tell me they actually did it. They could literally show up and not do any work at all. It just describes the job. I like to see, and I think a lot of other hiring managers like to see, the job description with a list of accomplishments. So I would highly recommend having a nice resume, tightened up to date, no errors, professionally done, but you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to be super creative with all sorts of wackadoodle type resumes. A 2-pager, short and sweet, to the point, no more than 2 pages. Usually they don't read them anyway. They don't go into the 3rd or 4th page and have them tightened up. But your career and your knowledge will get you a lot further than the resume. The resume is just to check a box to say they got it. So
there was another question that we have here is also resume related, and I think you've answered it, but he's also asking, any advice on preparing a resume, like no keywords, no nothing, there's no magical formula.
So that's a really good question. I can dig a little deeper. Yeah, if you're, as an example, in your overview on the top, before you get into your chronological assignments, you kind of have to write that. That's kind of tailored towards the job you're applying for. So that should be edited for each different role that you might be applying for. I wouldn't say I have a ton of experience in fleet management when you're applying for a job in, say, cyber analytics. They'll read that and say this person doesn't have anything to do. Now, clearly, your experience in your chronological assignments will help that and maybe answer that. But your first overview paragraph that explains who you are, quick and concise, that elevator pitch, if you will, should be, I would highly recommend that at least points to consistency with the role that you're applying for.
Excellent. I don't see any other questions. So with that, I would like to profoundly thank you, Tom. This has been an excellent hour, and I think everyone will agree it's well worth their time to have attended. I just want to say to the attendees as well that when they leave today, they're going to be hopefully presented with a survey. It's 3 questions. It'll literally take you about 30 seconds to fill it out, and it will be of great help to both Tom and I if you did that. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, and I'll be emailing you Tom's deck and the link to this recording probably by the end of the day.
Thank you. And I appreciate final thoughts. Please be safe out there. I know it's tougher than anything I could have ever imagined. Fight the fight. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay safe. Have each other's backs. Be careful. And I want to reiterate, the reason why I'm doing this today is because one of the things that most excites me in my life is to be able to share this knowledge, open up the doors, help you network, and transition you to successful careers in this space. Your value is incredible to these vendors. The vendors that embrace this expertise and knowledge do so much better than the other ones. It's a great working relationship. I've learned so much in business from some really great people and great leaders. It's a symbiotic relationship where you do for me, I do for you, and it works wonderfully. It's a really nice opportunity for the right people. So I wish you all the luck. I'm available to consult. My consultancies, I charge companies, but this was a free webinar. We may do a masterclass later. There's cost of goods and all that kind of stuff like that. But I'm not looking to charge exorbitant fees to anybody here or any of these calls. If this gains a lot of traction, I want you guys to know that this is something that I think it's my way of giving back and paying it forward, because the person who hired me, 14 years ago, went out of their way to make sure I was clear path for success in this space, and I want to return that back to you all. Excellent.
And with that, I would just like to encourage anybody who has any questions, if they think of them after this, to go ahead and email Tom. I'm sure you'll get an answer. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.